Here. You look nice.
Thank you.
Watching your pizza room.
Okay, so I want to welcome everybody on this beautiful Tuesday evening. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Before we start, will everyone please mute themselves? And that way we can be respectful of everyone that's on. Hello, Mr. Rex. You're just in time. We're about to get started with Mr. Glenn LeBlanc. And Mr. Glenn has so much experience in the health industry. He has over 30 years of experience in nutritional supplements and helping other people get back to the road of health. And it's been phenomenal to watch some of the people that he's worked with, the things that they've overcome just by working with him. He's got such a great in-depth understanding of how stem cells work. And I'm so grateful that he is willing to take his time to share with all of us. So Glenn, are you there?
I am. Good afternoon, everybody. Have you shared your screen?
Okay, hold on. And how do I do that? Share now. Okay.
All right.
Is that right?
Let me see. Coming up on it right now. I should be. All right. You have to give me permission to share my screen. You're sharing yours right now.
Okay. So I stop share. It's a learning process, everybody. There we go. Let's see. So is that a co-host?
Okay. I got it. I'm in.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. There we go.
All right. Let's see. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody tonight. I hope everybody had a wonderful Easter. And we're hopefully going to excite you about some things tonight of what's available to us and what so many of us have had the opportunity to take advantage of already. So if you're new to stem cell therapy, we have a lot to share with you tonight. LifeWave has come up with a very revolutionary, non-invasive process that has brought stem cell therapy right to the general public, which it certainly up until now has not been available. So we're going to talk about a few topics tonight that will make sense of how all of this therapy and technology works. We'll be talking about phototherapy, which is the delivery method. We'll discuss the GHK copper peptide and what it does inside of us to stimulate stem cell activity. Of course, we'll spend most of our time on stem cells, and then we're going to touch on water and how relevant that is to cell activity in general. So let's start with a little phototherapy. Light waves. The sun gives them off. They come in tremendous amount of different wavelengths, and the visible light wave spectrum is this little tiny swatch right down the center that we get to see. We know about ultraviolet rays. We know somewhat about infrared, but the visible part of the spectrum that we can see, obviously other animals see other wavelengths, but when you break down, and we're going to discuss refracting those waves, and what that basically means is if we take white light, the light we see, and pass it through a crystal or a prism, we can separate those individual wavelengths, and of course they appear to us in the different colors. Well, infrared has over 1 million wavelengths in it, and that's the area that the sun gives us that stimulates a lot of activity within our skin. You know, our skin is the largest organ on our body, and it is responsible for a lot of different chemical reactions in addition to just protecting our insides from the elements of outside. So if we look at an infrared picture where we take an infrared camera, we can see the different frequencies of infrared coming off of this person's body. And they appear in different colors based on what wavelength they are. And the red ones are the warmer, and the blue ones are the cooler sections. So with that in mind, we're going to talk in general about wavelengths. We've known for a long time that different spectrums of light cause different things to happen in our skin. So for instance, ultraviolet B causes the skin to produce vitamin D. Melatonin is another, or melatonin, which is a chemical that gives us a suntan. It causes pigmentation of our skin. That's another one caused by
Melanin.
melanin. Am I saying it right?
You can say it right, but now you're saying it wrong.
On the third try, I got it. But the point is that our skin produces so many different things, and that's how this technology is based. So the copper peptide, one of the things that our skin produces is a peptide. So what is a peptide? A peptide is a combination of amino acids. We refer to any combination of amino acids below 50 in a complex, a peptide. If it's over 50 amino acids, we refer to it as a protein. So it'll give you an idea. So this particular peptide is produced in our skin with a certain frequency of infrared light. And it is present in our serum bloodstream. It is pH sensitive, which will come into play later on. And so we see it in higher numbers in slightly alkaline bodies. As bodies become more acidic, we can produce less and less of it. The only problem is that we reach our peak production at about age 20. And by age 60, we've lost 65, 70% of that production. So as time goes on, we produce less and less of it. When you see all the different things that this peptide is responsible for in our system, you can understand as we age why we start having issues and problems that we don't have when we're young. Here are some of the benefits. First of all, when it is produced naturally within ourselves, not taken in the form of a supplement or an injection, but if our body produces it, there are no known side effects. It is important in our ability to heal, and it has anti-aging potentials. It protects our skin from UV damage. It reduces inflammation. It increases hair growth and thickness. It is relevant in the management of pain and anxiety and aggressions. So it is so important to a lot of different chemical reactions going on in our body. Improvement in bone density, repair and rejuvenation of nerve connectivity.
Dang.
Okay, somebody's not muted.
Can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
The up and down regulation of over 6,000 genes that they've discovered. And what does an up and down regulation mean? Well, I'd explain it by if we've seen people who have had no sensitivity to, let's say, shellfish their entire life. And then one day they have a shrimp or a crab or a lobster, and all of a sudden they have an allergic reaction. Well, what changed? Well, whatever gene that either suppressed that response, it changed over. It regulated either up or down, depending on its position. But all of a sudden, we now, or that person is now susceptible to an inflammatory response. Well, this peptide is what is controlling a lot of those gene regulations. So that's how that can be important. And so you see things happen later in life that didn't happen to us earlier. And it has to do with different things too, with rheumatoid arthritis and things of that sort, which can be gene related. Repair of lung tissue in COPD patients, DNA repair. Free radicals are damaging DNA all the time. Repairing that DNA is critical to our youthfulness as we age. Nerve regeneration in general. It's got anti-cancer effects. And one of its most important things, it is responsible for stimulating the proliferation of exosomes that are production in stem cells. And that's one of the critical things that we're going to discuss tonight when we discuss stem cells. So let's get into stem cells and what are they? Just so you know, stem cell research is being done more and has been over the last number of years than any other research on any disease or technology in history. There are over 6,500 clinical trials going on worldwide. You can look at those, and we've seen some of the results of stem cell therapies from well-known people like Tiger Woods and Shaquille O'Neal and Peyton and Eli Manning. Probably the most memorable one is Peyton Manning, who broke his neck playing football. They weren't sure he was going to be able to walk again, much less play ball, but he went and had stem cell therapy done in Germany. And not only did it heal and regenerate nerves, but the area was actually stronger than it was before, and it enabled him to go back to playing ball. So it's just some of the things that this kind of research and therapy is proving to be very beneficial. The problem is that kind of therapy is not FDA approved here in the US. He had to go to Germany to have that done. It came at a pretty price of about $125,000, in addition to him having to be over in Germany and live there for months on end. So that kind of therapy isn't generally available to the average person. And none of it's covered by insurance at this point, because some of it is still experimental. And so, you know, unless you've got the means to do that, it's not available to you. But fortunately, that has changed. The revolution of stem cells from LifeWave. Of course, all of us would like to feel younger, live longer, look better as we age, because we remember the days when no matter what we did the day before, we could get up the next morning and nothing fazed us. Those days gradually dissipate. So stem cells are the key. Stem cells are what repair and regenerate tissue. They're a vital part of our immune system, which has obviously been very in everybody's mind over the last year and what we've all gone through. And they regenerate damaged cells. So let's get some fundamentals. What are stem cells? Well, they are a specific kind of cell in our body that have three basic things that are involved with them. They're capable of dividing and renewing themselves for long periods of time. And when I say long periods of time, well into our hundreds, if we could live that long. So we can regenerate and they can divide and they can be present for our entire lifespan. They're unspecified, unspecialized cells. So they're not a specific cell like a bone or a liver or a lung cell, but they're capable of turning themselves into any one of those cells in a performance of regenerating or replacing a damaged cell. And they do that through a process of communication between themselves, which is done with exosomes. So what are exosomes? Well, exosomes are extracellular vehicles that that mother stem cells respond to cytokines that are produced when we hurt or damage something. We give off a response, and mother stem cells receive that, and they're capable of producing an RNA messenger, which is the exosome, that they then extrude into the bloodstream, that tells the worker stem cells what to go fix and repair. Without that communication, nothing happens. So, but as our bodies get older, we see rapid decline in the production of exosomes, and it is related to the amount of the GHK peptide in our system. And since it diminishes rapidly after we pass our peak at age 20, so do exosome production. So at age 30, we've lost 60%. By age 60, very little activity and almost no activity after the age of 70. So it's no wonder, as things are damaged or wear out and not being replaced, we see that degradation. So if we, like I said, hurt ourselves, we give off a chemical beacon that travels through our bloodstream that mother stem cells can receive that identify the damage. Here's a picture of a stem cell, and all of these little hair follicles are what receive that chemical signal and then enable it to perform the production of an exosome that is specifically manufactured or created to respond to that damage precisely. And so here's a picture of our green stem cell is a mother stem cell. It produced all of those little RNA packets based on a signal it received. It extrudes them into the bloodstream. The worker stem cells receive them in their receptors, and they now know exactly where to go and what to go fix. They can follow that chemical trail like a breadcrumb trail back to the damage, and then they're programmed specifically to repair or replace the tissue that has been damaged. So it can literally turn itself then into any tissue in our body that has been damaged, which in the past, you know, we've seen doctors say, if you've torn up cartilage or you've totally degenerated cartilage in your knee, that's not something that's going to grow back. A knee replacement is the only way to deal with that. Well, now with stem cell therapy, we can actually grow that tissue back. Or COPD patients that once damage within their lung takes place, those areas are dead and won't regenerate. Well, stem cells can regenerate them. The problem is that unfortunately they're inactive as we get older. Neuropathy pain that comes from either damage or you know, diabetes causes nerve damage and neuropathy and all of the pain that comes with that. So stem cells are the key, and it's why so much research is being done in delivery methods to allow our stem cells to become active again. So here's some example of some studies that just show the potential of what stem cells can do. In this case, all the little arrows are pointing to these red dots, and those are stem cells that are migrating to a damaged nerve cell and repairing or regenerating the tissue that's damaged. If we look at this study, which was done way back in 2002, and I purposely used an older study because even back then, the potential of what they were discovering was remarkable. So in this case, we've got somebody with neuropathy, either poor blood flow, but nerve damage. And so if we look at before they, in this case, these were working on injectable stem cells. Here's the 2 feet prior to it, a fair amount of activity in the left foot, but virtually none in the right foot. And within 14 days of injecting stem cells, you see all the massively increased activity in both feet. So not only relief, but in, you know, nerves are going to control the blood flow. All of the things that would cause further damage or injury can be regenerated. So that was all very positive. Here's some things on blood vessels. We talked about the GHK peptide capable of increasing blood flow. So figure A shows the amount of vascularity in a certain area. And after 24 weeks after implantation, you can see almost better than double the amount of vascularity in that area. So the improved blood flow to the region. Here's another one, and this is actually a heart. So here's an area that was pinched off from a blockage. And with the stem cell therapy, we grabbed all of these lateral vessels that grew back, improving and taking the place of the blood flow to the area that was being compromised by blockages. We've now regenerated that blood flow, so it enables that muscle to work better. When it comes to COPD, if we look at lung tissue, a healthy lung has the alveoli, which are the little sacs that have the blood vessels in them that exchange gases, pulls carbon dioxide out of our bloodstream and puts oxygen back in. In a person with COPD, a number of things begin to happen depending on what that damage could be. A restriction of their bronchial, which then causes inflammation. And as we know so often, if you cause any inflammation, you get a mucus response. It's the body's attempt to protect that area. But if you've already got a much restricted flow and then you fill it with mucus, you pretty much block it off. And then in this particular sac, you see all of the alveoli have died off and are non-functional. Well, as that happens throughout the lung, we can get less and less gas exchange. And that was a problem because they didn't know of any way to recover that. Bronchial dilators could expand this bronchial, but if the air sacs were dead, well, then they weren't getting, it didn't matter whether you got air to it or not. So we've seen, and here's some x-rays that I'll show you of a lung. And the good sections of the lung should be all black like this.
You went muted, Glenn. There you go.
All right. Any of the areas that are cloudy or have white in it, or areas that are dead tissue. Only the black areas are the healthy tissue. So you can see this person is in serious trouble. He's got very, very little, probably less than 20% of his lung exchanging gases. As tissue around our body, organs all over our body, cannot get their proper amount of oxygen, one of the things that ultimately kills COPD patients is the degradation of all the different organs throughout the body from the lack of oxygen and the increased supply or concentration of CO2 that can't escape the blood. So you produce a much more acidic environment that causes additional problems. After the therapy, we can see, all right, come on, baby. These are the same pair of lungs, and look at the improvement in the regenerated tissue. So regrow the tissue, eliminate the scar tissue, it all begins to disappear, and this person's exchanging gases and breathing very well at that point. So, you know, these are things that happen to us over time, and unfortunately we don't recognize them until they become pretty severe, and then we've already got the problem. So it's estimated that there's over 12 million diagnosed people with COPD, but they think that there's probably close to 15 million undiagnosed. Because it's such a slow problem, people don't recognize it until they have severe damage. So the ability to use stem cell therapy along the way, things that are happening inside of us that we can repair before they become a major problem, is a tremendous benefit in slowing the aging process down. And being proactive may save you from ever having the problem in itself. So, you know, stem cells can heal damaged lung tissue, they can regrow new blood vessels, and they can even show tremendous healing, as we saw in those neuropathy pictures. When it comes to rheumatoid arthritis, now we're talking about immunomodulation activity, where genes are turning on or off and causing not an allergic, but an inflammatory response and causing damage. In the case of rheumatoid arthritis, we're talking about destruction of the joint itself. And the GHK peptide in proper concentrations can remodulate that gene back to its original state and shut off that inflammatory response. So they're seeing a tremendous amount of response there and actually repairing the damaged joint. So not just stopping the continuation of the deterioration, but regenerating and repairing that. So let's discuss the general, prior to this discovery that LifeWave has done, what was the only stem cell therapy. And this is where 99.9% of all the research has been going to, and that is commercially produced exosomes. So how do they do that? Well, they take adult stem cells, which are primarily gotten from umbilical cords, which is the mother stem cell. They tend to be very active because the baby is excreting chemicals that activate production of exosomes and activity within stem cells in the umbilical cord of the mother. So they can capture those, they're readily available, ongoing supply, and they capture those and they look at the ones that are producing exosomes. They cultivate them and they grow them in petri dish, and they grow more and more of them so that they continue to excrete exosomes. Now, how do they keep them growing and producing exosomes? Well, they put a solution of the GHK copper peptide in that petri dish, and it causes those to continue to do. There's a few issues there, though. Number one, they are non-specific exosomes. So they have not been programmed by the mother stem cell to treat a specific problem that it recognized is damaged within your body. Now, in most cases, they're injecting them into the area that needs to be repaired, so they can't help but bump into the damaged tissue, and they obviously see results that way. And all of the pictures we showed you earlier, or in the use of injected stem cells, or in not technically stem cells, but the exosomes that the stem cells produce. There's a few things. Number one, they're very expensive, up to 10,000, even some cases more than that. Depending on the problem, it could take multiple injections. And like we said a little earlier, not covered by insurance. So it's not readily available to the average person. But here's some other issues that are involved with stem cell injections. They're expensive, as we just talked about. They are risky because they're not your own stem cells or exosomes. Your body can recognize them as a foreign invader, and your immune system can actually go in and kill them off. So some people have some responses, negative responses to them. In most cases, there's not a negative response so much as they're just all killed off and there is no positive response. It doesn't do anything. So they're controversial from that standpoint, which is why the FDA has not given their approval to so many of these therapies here in the United States. There are a handful that are available, but the one, for instance, that Peyton Manning had is not available. He had to go to Germany. You can go to Mexico or Panama. Those countries have approved some of this already. They're not guaranteed. One of the first things that if you speak to doctors who are injecting these exosomes, they cannot be done intravenously for general body health. They can only be done in a specific area like a knee or a heart or whatever they're injecting those stem cells into to try to repair. And the first thing they'll tell you that there's no guarantee. And they know that because of the things we just talked about. Your body can reject them, kill them all off, and there's a 20% failure rate. Very few things hit the market with failure rates of 20%, especially at those kinds of costs. So those are some of the reasons that with the billions of dollars that have been invested in that kind of research and all the promise, there are still major problems with that. So here comes a scientist with a whole different approach. David Smith, he's the founder and the CEO of LifeWave, and his research has been heavily into phototherapy. He has over 70 patents in that line, with over 30 patents still pending. The leading edge of phototherapy research for over 20 years, and has already conducted over 80 clinical studies proving the efficiency of the LifeWave phototherapy patches. And last March, about a year ago, he got his patent in record time. Now, what does it take to get a patent? Well, it takes two things. Number one, you have to have an invention that is very different than anything else they're not going to give you a patent on something that is somebody else's research that you may have slightly fine-tuned, and you get the credit and the patent. So you have to prove that you have a unique product. His phototherapy patches were indeed that. The other thing you have to do is prove through clinical studies that it does what you say it's doing. And what does he say it's doing? That it is taking infrared light waves and from the form of heat that come off of our body, and it refracts them, breaks them into their individual wavelengths, And what took so long to discover, when you've got over 1 million wavelengths of infrared, was which wavelength stimulate the skin to produce the copper peptide. Once he discovered that, the crystalline structure that the patch has in it reflects that wavelength back into the skin, stimulating the skin to then start producing the peptide. He had to prove that that happened. And once he did, then the patent office gives that information out to a number of different research facilities that have to then recreate those results. And only after that do they release the patent, which he got, like I said, in less than a year and a half. Most patents take 5, in some cases up to 10 years to get. So this was so profound and unique, and the clinical studies proved that it indeed did what he said it was doing. He got the patent, and it's a 20-year patent, so nobody else can recreate this delivery method. So those are basically the differences. The X39 uses phototherapy. Now, the patch, about the size of a quarter. It is 2 plant-based material. What am I thinking of? It's not plastic, in other words. It's not a chemical-based covering, but it's encased in this, and it's a cellulose, plant-based cellulose, and it's clear, so the light waves go through the patch. They hit the crystals, which are also a plant-based amino acid crystalline structure that refracts them, reflects them back into the skin. The skin starts producing the copper peptide. There were centuries of research on the copper peptide. It was just, and efforts have been done to give it to people in supplements. That didn't work. By the time our body breaks them down and the liver does its job on them, there's very little. So they didn't see with supplements an increase in blood serum levels. And with supplements, you can actually overdose and have some negative side effects. So supplementation or injections really didn't work. So they were struggling to figure out, what can we do to raise this peptide? David found that out. But because the peptide drops off naturally in our body so early in life, so does the production of exosomes, because exosomes need that peptide in order to be produced. So without proper amounts of the copper peptide, we don't produce exosomes. Consequently, our stem cells become inactive. So the X39 can reset those stem cells to start becoming very active, and we can see that happening very quickly. Increases of up to 300% of serum levels of the copper peptide within a 24-hour period. Now, the peptide, the GHK, is the 3 amino acids. They begin to bond at not bond, but the skin produces that peptide. And then over a 3 to 5 day period, it begins to bond with copper, being a mineral. And minerals are what proteins and peptides use just to catalyze chemical reactions that they're going to do throughout the body. So that happens within a few days, but the peptide itself shows a lot of different results, as we talked earlier. So you see immediate results, and some people see tremendous results in the first 24 to 48 hours. But certainly after a week, when then it combines with the copper, and you now have what the stem cells need to start producing their exosomes, we see an improvement in exosome activity, and now we start getting the regeneration and repair and wound healing and better sleep and all the different things that a strong, active stem cells can do for us. So these patches were released in January of 2019. Now, at that time, David's company was 15 years old. There were a number of other patches that he had developed over time in searching out and researching what wavelength was going. The goal was always to find the wavelength to produce the GHK peptide, but along the way, he discovered other wavelengths that did other things. One that is a sleep patch that improves the body's production of melatonin. one that improves the body's ability to produce ADP and energy. So there are a whole list of patches that were available prior to the discovery of this one. And the company was highly successful and profitable for a long time prior to this patch release. So if we look at this particular patch, this was the big breakthrough, because this one did what he was attempting to do. And he was able to do what multi-billion-dollar companies in big pharma were unable to do, and still unable to do till today. Patent, like I said, one of a kind, no competition. And you can go to X39clinicalstudies.com, and there are all of those studies on there that you can read through and see that show you indeed it does what he said it does. Athletes have been using these patches. Here are some of the energy patches that this particular athlete, obviously the rest of them are clothed that you don't see them, but in all different areas, Olympic teams and everything have been using David's patches for a long time. Improvement of sleep, certainly one of the things that the copper peptide does, but the chemical changes that take place in our brain when we have active stem cells have improved sleep. Just some other things, wrinkle reduction, because what is the most produced protein in our body? Collagen. What does collagen need to perform? It needs the ability of stem cell activity to produce a high quality matrix of collagen. So as we get older and we get less and less of the copper peptide available in our skin, or in our bloodstream, we produce less tight, and the quality of our collagen matrix goes down. Hence we have dimples and rimples and wrinkles and everything forming in our skin that wasn't there when we were much younger. Here's some examples of that. If we look at our picture on the right, here is a lady prior to using the patches, and we can see the lines beginning to form in her neck, in her mouth, around her mouth area, and below her eyes. This is after using the stem cell patches, the X39, for a few months, and you can certainly see the improvement in her neck and under her eyes. Here's another lady. This is day one, and you can see again those wrinkles around the mouth and in the neck. This is 30 days later. We're starting to see tremendous improvement in that area. And after 4.5 months, a remarkable change in that. And this one is the one I probably like the best. Here's the lady in day one. We see some brow lines, some wrinkles under the eye, along the mouth area, and certainly in her neck. 42 days later, we're starting to see quite a bit of improvement. But here's what a year's worth of these, we didn't get old and overnight. It took time for all of this damage to take place. It takes time for the body to repair all of that thing. But look at what a year has done for her. These lines around her nose, but especially under her eyes. I also want you to look at the eyelid. That's one of the things we see as we get older. The eyelid doesn't pick up as much, and it droops a little bit. It improved with just a few months under it, but look at the difference after a year of the amount of space above that eye. So she's getting the eyelid opening much greater. Hair growth, as we talked about earlier, some examples of before and after use in these cases. Here's a great one after a year's worth of use. Look at the improvement in hair growth in this gentleman. Scar reduction, because the ability to remodel skin. We're producing new skin every 14 to 16 weeks from the lower parts of our dermis all the way up to the surface. As we're producing better and better quality of collagen in that lower skin, it improves the skin as it comes up, but it can also take scar tissue and remodel that, replace it basically with good live tissue instead of scar tissue. Wound healing, certainly this peptide is tremendous in that, because what heals wounds, it is stem cells. So here's some example. Here's a young man who was in an accident. You can see the severe damage to this hand, cutting of tendons and stuff. They weren't sure he was going to get the reuse of that. You can see right here, he's got his patch on. This is 63 days later. So in 2 months, he went from this to this. You can hardly, I mean, you know from this picture where that scar is, but if you didn't, you would not be able to pick it out, not knowing he had the damage, and got full use of that hand. Here's a little 9-year-old boy, or 11 years old, I forget one of his age, but right in that area of his life, and smashed the tip of his finger and severed it in a door. They stitch it back on, but until he got regeneration of both nerves and blood supply to the area, you can see the tissue was beginning to die back. After using the patches, because they can regenerate nerves and regenerate blood tissue and vessels, the fingertip completely came back and he got full use of. So renewal of skin, like we just talked about, and the global expansion of the market. The more and more people are learning about what stem cells are capable of doing, the more and more people are striving to get their hands on it. And, you know, billions are still being spent. I know LifeWave is continuing to spend millions and millions of dollars on further research of improving these patches. In 2018, which was prior to releasing the X39 stem cell patch, a very successful, completely solvent, but more importantly, debt-free company. So they didn't owe any money on buildings or anything else. They did $20 million in sales. Here comes the X39, and in 2019, that jumped to $70 million. So tremendous improvement in their revenue flow. And in 2020, they exceeded $220 million. So you can see the tremendous growth that patch has done, and it's grown because people continue to use it because it is performed and it has done things for people. So, you know, they're talking about $1 billion company in the next 3 to 5 years. That's the kind of growth. So, you know, using these as a customer, certainly, a lot of people begin that way, and after they do what they do for them, they can't help but share the news, and a distributorship program is available for those who would like to help us spread the word. So it is certainly changing lives. Now, let's talk about water for a minute, because water and cell activity go hand in hand. Obviously, without water and sunlight, life cannot exist. Even slight dehydration affects a cell's ability to perform to its potential. For every 3% of dehydration, a cell loses 10% of its ability to do work. So if it's a muscle, we see a football player playing ball, and over a 3-hour period of the game, he diminishes in, you know, he wears out quicker. He starts diminishing in his performance, and that's because he's dehydrating. But if it's a heart cell, or it's a liver cell, or a kidney cell, they're all lowering their performance levels too. And we don't get thirsty until we're about 10% dehydrated. That's our sign that we need some water. By then, we've already lost 30% of those functionalities. That makes a big difference. In addition to that fact, the processing and the purification process of what municipalities have to do to bring us safe water changes the structure and the charge on the water molecules, which reduces our cells' ability to absorb them, the waters that we're drinking. So the average amount of the typical water that people are drinking is actually only absorbed into their cells at about 15 to 17% over a 3 to 4 hour period. Well, if you're doing hard work, exercise, or anything else, you're getting rid of water at a far greater rate than you can resupply it with that small amount ever getting to the cell itself. You're drinking a lot, but it's not ever reaching the cell, which leaves most people chronically dehydrated all the time. This results in the cell's increase in acidity and a reduction of the body's ability to detox, and it increases systemic inflammation. Since the GHK peptide is pH sensitive and exists in higher numbers in slightly alkaline bodies, reaching optimal blood serum levels is dependent on maintaining a slightly alkaline pH in our body, which water becomes a critical part of. So let's look at why and how that works in a cell. So the function of water in proper increases of blood serum levels of the peptide, which stimulate our stem cells to produce exosome, is critically important. Every biochemical reaction that happens in our body happens within the solvent of water. It is the vehicle that transports oxygen and nutrients to every cell in our body. So what structure of water should we be drinking to properly hydrate, detox, and return the cell's natural negative charge and its ability to remove acid waste from the cell? That is electrolyzed reduced water. Now, that is a process that happens naturally in nature in a number of different ways. We can get electromagnetic fields underneath the earth that charge the water and change its structure as it comes up. A perfect example of that is the well at Lourdes, France, the miracle waters of Lourdes, France. That's what happens. As the water comes up and percolates through the ground, there are magnetic fields that are tearing that water molecule apart and restructuring it to have a strong negative charge, which we're going to explain why that's critical, as well as with that negative charge, the water doesn't cluster together in large clusters, which then are too big to enter cells. It happens natural in the photosynthesis process of plants, where a plant will take not only minerals, but the water that it takes up through the photosynthesis process, breaks it down, charges the water, and charges the minerals and puts those minerals in an ionic state, which is the way our bodies are designed to absorb minerals. So there's a company who developed a process to recreate what happens naturally in nature, since in effect, we're screwing that process up by the processes of purifying water. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be obviously be doing that. In order to get safe water to households and people all over the world, we have to purify water. We just need to understand that that process changes the water, and we need to find a way to get it back to its original state in order for our bodies to utilize it properly. So if we look at our H2O molecule, we got one oxygen and two hydrogens. The process of electrolysis, no matter how it happens, naturally in nature, in plants, or through this device, basically takes and puts an electrical charge that will separate one, or in some cases, both of those hydrogens. Now, why is that important? Because a solution that has hydrogen one hydrogen atom, which is positively charged in it, the greater the amount of hydrogen one that's in a solution, the greater the acidity of that solution is. Acidic solutions repel oxygen. So as our bodies become acidic, we are less capable of having proper oxygen saturations within our cells, which cause a myriad of problems. So the process of electrolysis, what it does by ripping those hydrogens off, results in some cases, like I said, both hydrogens being pulled, we end up with an oxygen molecule that is negatively charged. We also can end up with H2, which is a very different molecule than H1. H1s are positively charged, H2s are negatively charged. And then we also end up with some hydroxyl molecules, which are OH, only one hydrogen attached to the oxygen, and that is also a very negatively charged atom. So how do these things work at our cellular level? So if we look at our cell here on the left side, the interior of our cells need to be negatively charged. The exterior of our cells are positively charged. And ideally, the cell should be in balance. The membrane that allows fluid in and out of a cell is extremely positively charged. It's nature's way of stopping positively charged fluids from entering the cell, because positively charged fluids are oxidizing. It also, when you have a positively charged, why is a molecule positively charged? Because it's missing electrons. And so it will cluster together. So you get large clusters of water molecules that are trying to share electrons since they independently are missing some. They end up clustering in large clusters of 16 to 30 molecules, which ends up too large of a cluster to enter the membrane. On top of the fact that they're positively charged, so the positive to positive repel. We've seen the positive ends of two magnets trying to be pushed together. They're going to repel each other. This is why those forms and structures of water only absorb about 15% into the cell, because the only reason that any of it gets into the cell is we end up engorging this connective tissue outside the cells with water. And as our heart beats, we're putting pressure on everything, and we put pressure that basically rams some of the water. Because if we take a magnet, we can, if we're strong enough, push the two ends together. Even though they're trying to fight, we can make them touch. Well, that's what in effect happens, and you ram some of that water into the cell. That's why only 15% of it ever reaches the inside the cell. Now, we've got other activity going on in the cell. The metabolism of food or fuel, the burning of fuel in the cell produces a waste product. Just like if we burned a log, we could take a big old log, burn it, we end up with a little tiny pile of ash. That's what's left after the burning of the fuel is done. So as we're metabolizing food and burning that food or that fuel with oxygen, we produce a waste product, and that waste product is, guess what? Hydrogen 1. Since the interior of our cells are negatively charged and we got a positively charged hydrogen atom, it's going to stick to the wall of the cell, doing two things. Number one, it doesn't readily leave the cell because it's stuck to the wall. So as water goes in and out of the cell, it stays. The more of those we have in the cell, the greater the acidity of the cell is. Now, acidic solutions repel oxygen. So now we're trying to burn fuel in a cell that has low oxygen levels. And in that case, the fuel burns very inefficiently. We've seen a flame, a gas flame, if it's got the proper mixture of air, oxygen, it will burn very efficiently in tight little white, blue, hot flame. If you put a pot over it, very little waste product or soot ever gets on the pot because it's such an efficient burn. But if we lower the amount of oxygen to that flame, we will get a big yellow meandering flame that if you put a pot on, you will soot the pot up almost instantly. A very inefficient burn. So two things are happening. We have less efficient burn, which actually produces more waste. So we're exacerbating the problem. As the cell wall lines itself with all of these positively charged hydrogen atoms, it's neutralizing the charge on the cell wall everywhere they're attached. So eventually we fill the cell, and that cell can no longer receive brain signals, which are electrons that are flowing through nerve tissue. And if the cell ceases to become negatively charged, it stops receiving those signals. So it becomes totally inactive, in addition to be highly acidic. Highly acidic cells put a tremendous burden on our buffering systems. You know, I've heard people say, and physicians will tell me, well, our bodies are prepared and it has mechanisms to buffer acidity, and it does, but we can overwhelm them. We can get to a point where we have so much acid that needs to be buffered that we cannot produce enough buffers, and then our entire body becomes more and more acidic. And we see problems that come. A lot of our diseases, the majority of our diseases, are all acid-borne diseases. They happen to us as our bodies become more acidic. If they weren't acidic, those diseases wouldn't be prevalent in us. So now let's look at electrolyzed reduced water. Number one, because it is negatively charged, they no longer cluster in an attempt to share electrons. They're individual molecules and atoms. So we no longer have a large cluster trying to fill into a little tiny hole. We're not trying to shove a baseball into a golf ball size hole. We have little bitty individual atoms that can enter the cell readily. They're negatively charged. The membrane, the aquaporin, are positively charged. So now we're putting the negative end of a magnet to the positive end of a magnet, they pull towards each other. So we draw that water into the cell. Now, of course, there's H2O molecules, your water, there's hydroxyl atoms, and there are just oxygen that are left in here. There are also H2, and H2 is a strong antioxidant, because if I have, the matter of fact, the most oxidizing, damaging free radical in our body is an oxygen atom that is a lost electron, so it is now positively charged. If I have H2 that is negatively charged, it can come in, combine with that oxygen, neutralize that free radical, and produce a water molecule. Nothing harmful, obviously. So the other thing that happens, so first of all, we hydrate very rapidly. This water enters the cell. Instead of 15% over a 3 to 4 hour period of time, we get about 98% that can happen in 2 to 5 minutes. So rapid hydration and complete hydration of the cell. The water we drink actually gets into the cell. Once in there, these hydroxyl ions, because their negative charge is actually stronger than the cell wall's negative charge, they can pluck these hydrogen atoms back off the cell wall, producing a water molecule. When the water leaves the cell, it takes that acid waste with it. This is how we remove acid waste from a cell, allowing our natural buffering systems to reach an equilibrium of cell pH, which should be slightly alkaline. That is critical for properly burning fuel and producing energy, but it's also tremendously critical for the GHK peptide to reach its maximum levels within our blood, because as our body becomes acidic, it cannot do that. So to reach those levels, proper water and cell hydration and cell charge is critically important. So this cell becomes negatively charged again. If it had gone to sleep because it was completely negated its inner charge, it can actually wake back up and get back in the game. So if you've got a heart muscle that is being clogged up with cells that are completely filled with hydrogen waste and have neutralized the charge in them, and they're not pumping effectively, people need pacemakers. They end up with congestive heart failure. This kind of water can actually clean that waste back out, reviving the charge on the cell, and the cell will come back and start operating again, and certainly operating efficiently. So this is how we change the pH in a cell, not by putting alkaline water in it. Alkaline water is water that, and there's a big difference between alkaline water and electrolyzed reduced water. Yes, electrolyzed reduced water's pH is slightly alkaline, or is alkaline, but for a completely different reason than alkaline water. Alkaline water basically talks about the introduction of minerals to the water, and those buffering minerals change the pH of the water. They're basically absorbing the H1, combining them, and stop and allowing the pH to rise. The problem is those elemental minerals are minerals in a format that our body can't use. So all alkaline waters that are mineral charged end up positively charged. So they don't enter and hydrate any better than any other type of water. So we don't end up getting them into the cell, and they don't have hydroxyl ions. So even the little bit that gets in the cell may temporarily neutralize a small amount of the acid in the cell, but when that water leaves, it does not take any of the hydrogen with it. Consequently, the cell goes acidic again. So alkaline water, drinking alkaline water, doesn't hydrate you properly, number one. Number two, it doesn't change the pH of the cell. So that's a misnomer. So don't confuse electrolyzed reduced water. Now, the reason electrolyzed reduced water has a alkaline pH is because we removed all of these H1 atoms, so it has far less H1. Consequently, its pH will climb because it's the H1 that's causing the acidity. The less of it we have in it, the more. But again, the fact that it's alkaline has nothing to do with getting rid of this H1 and changing the pH on the interior of the cell. So this is how electrolyzed reduced water changes cell pH, which is beneficial to the peptide, changes hydration, which is critical to all cells in our body working effectively and efficiently, and stem cells or cells. So if they are dehydrated or if they're cluttered with acid waste, they are not going to perform well no matter what we do. Even if we activate them, they're going to perform poorly. So we certainly see people who are drinking electrolyzed reduced water getting far greater and more quick benefits than people who are not, who are drinking these other types of water. So that is our presentation tonight. I am certainly open to questions. I'm going to stop my share, come back on, and I'm sure somebody's had some questions. You feel free. I'm sure we got a little bit of time left. Desiree, I'll turn it back over to you and entertain anything that anybody needs.
Glenn, I don't even know how you can remember all of that. That is so incredible, all of that information. And every time I hear you deliver that presentation, it just gives me chills, the depth of knowledge that you have and the understanding that you bring to us in layman's terms. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. Who has questions? Just unmute yourself and come forward.
Colleen's in the chat. Please unmute Colleen and come on.
Hey, Glenn, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I have a situation personally that I want to ask to see. I know that normally they say to put the patches up like around C6, C7, and then on like 3 finger widths below your belly button for the most part. But that if you have a certain area that, you know, is really, really bothering you or have a problem, that you can put it there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a situation where a few years back, I have the artery that goes from my heart to my brain that goes up through my left nostril, and that artery blew.
So it's a systemic issue. It's going to put GHK in our bloodstream everywhere in our body. Consequently, stem cells are going to start reacting all over. But you want to put it on a warm spot, a high blood flow spot. So that's why that spot is important. And then below the navel, because obviously while we were in utero, that's where all of our blood supply came. And even though we're no longer connected to the outside, all of those blood vessels are there. We've got over 75,000 blood vessels are right around our navel. So it is, again, a warm, high blood flow area, so that as we're producing the peptide, it gets into the bloodstream readily. What I tend to do is I rotate them, because the skin can become sensitive to stimulation, or not can, it does, which is the reason we only wear them 12 hours on and 12 off.
Right.
If you leave it on nonstop, the skin will eventually stop responding to the stimulation. So the 12 hours off gives a chance to go back and respond again the next day. But what I'll tend to do is I'll put them on my neck one day, my stomach the next day. So now I've had 24 plus hours of time before stimulating that same skin. If I do work outside and my shoulders or neck are tight and stiff or sore from the work I do, the next day I'm putting it on my neck. Get it as close to the damaged area as possible, only from the standpoint of we're producing exosomes that are going out throughout the bloodstream. You're going to start repairing damage throughout your body. But some of them are stopping along the way, right? So if I'm putting it, if I got a cramp in my leg and I put it down there, it's working in that area first because it's right there to do it. It doesn't have to travel as far. So
Right.
I would use the back of my neck as the spot.
That's what I've been doing. Yeah.
And I think that's the proper thing. But every few days, go ahead and give that area a break and stick it on your stomach. You're still going to be
Okay.
producing, and just so that you don't overstimulate that one spot, and you'll get the best effectiveness from it.
Okay. That's what I'm going to do then.
Keep in mind, we have to have proper expectations of time. We all would love stuff that happened tomorrow
Right.
or tonight, but you know, these damages take a long time to repair. Even in young children, things will take a long time, depending on its severity. So as we get older, Yes, we're stimulating more and more activity as if we were younger, but it's still, be realistic on how long some of those kinds of damages will take. For example, rejuvenation of cartilage in a knee, low blood supply, cartilage formation is a very, very slow process. So even with stem cell injections right into the area or our patches, we're probably looking at such a gradual process. It could take up to a year to totally regenerate that cartilage, because it's an area we're also using every day. So
Right.
we inflame it every day we walk on it. So we're recreating some new cells and we're wearing some of those that we just made out again. So it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So those kinds of things take time. Heavy blood flow areas obviously will heal quicker because you just got more blood flow to it. But I think you're doing the correct thing and stay with it. I would also consider using the glutathione patch, because
Oh, okay.
glutathione has a lot to do with it assists in regrowing of both nerve and blood vessels. So you could see an improvement there also with the addition of those patches in.
And where would you suggest I put that?
Well, again, that patch is best. They give you a number of selection places that you can
Okay.
see, and it's different pressure points and meridians on your body. So you can follow those directions, but 2 of them are the belly button and the back of the neck. One of them's on the top of the toe, on your right foot, because we have different charges on our right and left sides of our body. This patch tends to work in the central line of our body or to the right side, or in some cases on the web of our hand is
Okay.
another spot. Those are just meridians that may form, but read that patch or go to the website. It'll tell you a lot about that.
Okay.
That may be a little bit more specific, but again, moving them around makes a difference. Now, you can have X39 on your back, glutathione on your stomach, reverse those the next day because it's a different frequency of wavelength. So you're stimulating the skin differently, even though it's the same skin that was stimulated the day before.
Okay, I will do that right away and get with Desiree. So,
And then
Okay.
if you are not drinking electrolyzed reduced water, get with Desiree on that, because that will dramatically improve the response to all of this.
okay. I'm very grateful for you. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
What a great question. And I love the answer too. It's very wonderful to have you be able to kind of guide people through all of this. And remember, everyone, that this is not a drug or a cure. We're not making any medical claims. If you have medical issues, you go and see your physician. And we're not really able to say diagnosis, but you can give symptoms because we can treat symptoms. So
With that, can I say one thing?
yes,
Desiree?
please. Yeah.
Remember, the only thing that heals our body is our body.
Yes.
Drugs, medication, they reduce symptoms, they reduce inflammation, allowing the body to heal maybe a little quicker. But you've got to give the body its tools to repair itself. But the other thing you have to do is you have to stop the assault on the area. So inflammation is an assault. That's what they're doing with anti-inflammatory medications. Our electrolyzed reduced water, tremendous anti-inflammatory. Glutathione, tremendous anti-inflammatory. The body's #1 antioxidant that we actually produce ourselves is produced because of glutathione, or it is glutathione that we make. So the more of it we can make, the better. So stopping the assault is critical. And I often use the example as if we scrape our knee and we bandage it and we protect it. In 5 to 7 to 10 days, we got brand new skin on there. Our body repaired it all. If we hit it every day and knock the scab off, if we continue to assault it, it's never going to heal because it can't catch up, heal, and receive the damage yet again and ever get where it needs to go. So stopping assault is a critical part of that. But that's why we're not talking about diagnosing or healing. Our body's healing. We're just giving it all the right tools to do it. Okay, somebody else has a question?
Patrick, you can unmute yourself. And Patrick is new to the team. I haven't even spoke to him myself. Welcome.
Hello, y'all. Hey, My question is a little different, I think. About back in 2007, I had a pretty bad exposure to carbon monoxide. Did it affect my heart and my memory? Heart's doing pretty good right now, but my memory's still sketchy and
Mhm.
similar to, yeah, see right there, I can't think of it. It's what other old guys get, but I know I'm working on it and improving it. Now, how much would this actually help?
Well, tremendously. And here's the thing, carbon monoxide basically depletes cells of oxygen. That's why you get the damage. So the only way to, just like what happens in the lungs that we showed you pictures of, the only way to regenerate that tissue, whether it be nerve connectivity in the brain or regenerate blood supply to areas of the heart, or actually regenerate cell tissue within the heart itself, is with stem cells. They're the only thing that can turn themselves into that specific cell. The GHK copper peptide does a good job in itself of improving nerve connectivity. And then the X39, which creates that, also with the stem cell activity can replenish and replace those cells. So yes, I would use X39, and I think over time you will see a gradual improvement because again, we're giving the body its tools to repair and replace. Unfortunately, one of our biggest tools of repairing and replacing is stem cells. And as we get older, because we don't produce the peptide, we don't have the stem cell activity. So we don't. Being able to recreate that youthful serum level will bring that activity way up and can actually begin to improve it. So I have seen people with certain areas of dementia and even just cognitive slowness, and we all get that. I mean, as we get older, our response times, our reaction times all begin to slow down. So what is that? That is the slower response and movement of electricity through those nerve cells. That's because they're beginning to wear out. Those cells are not as productive, and we're not replacing or repairing them because we don't have the stem cell activity. As we recreate the stem cell activity, we can then go in and recreate those. But again, it took a long time to get there. In your case, it came quick because of injury, but it was going to slowly happen over time anyway, right? So it's going to take time to reverse that process. But, you know, at our age, I mean, I'm in my late 60s, stopping it is a good beginning, and then gradually seeing the reversal makes a big difference. And I have actually seen that. I'm a pilot and I do a lot of aerobatic work. That takes real quick, instant, not only perceptions, but reaction times. And there's no question over time, as I've gotten older compared to, you know, when I was flying the air show circuit in my 30s, where my response time was dead on, I could see deterioration, and I've seen improvement in those response times. So I'm back to doing activities, the more difficult aerobatic maneuvers that take higher precision levels much better than I had been. And the only difference is I've been on the patch for a year now, and hopefully I'm gradually seeing that reaction time increase. The only reason that would be happening is because I'm improving nerve activity and transmission in the brain.
Glenn, how old are you?
I'm 67.
2 years above me. I want to make one more comment about the heart.
Yeah.
I personally have seen the heart repair itself. That back then, before we had this information, I was taking a product that was supposed to be for the heart, and one night I was laying in bed and I felt an electrical sensation throughout my chest. I mean, it was like a short circuit. And I just, I'm a person of faith and just say, okay, God, this is it. I'm home. Woke up in the next morning and I never had pain after that, chest pain. So
Yeah,
I know the body does repair itself.
Yeah, it does. There's no question it does. And I tell you, one of the great things, you want to talk about testimonial issues, one of the research studies they've done on the X39 talks about vascular age, which is a description of vascular health. And we look at vascular age by looking at an artery, how thick the wall of the artery is, whether it's got plaque in it, which is showing that there's been damage, how thick that plaque is it calcified, is it soft plaque, which tends to show more new, how deep in the wall of the cell is the plaque, shows the severity of the damage. And so all of that can be measured through some of these new high intensity Doppler ultrasounds today. Well, the studies show that for every so many weeks that you're on the X39 patches, you get a day or two of reduction of vascular age. So after I was on the patch for about 65 to 70 days, I went and had one of those tests, and I had had it before, and my age of my vessels were pretty close to my age. They were only a few years older than what I was, which was pretty typical. After being on the patches for less than 90 days, I went and had it redone, and my vascular age had declined to 46, 20-year reduction in vascular age. And they could see the difference in the cell wall thickness had thinned again. So it was more flexible, it was moving, it was responding rather than being rigid. And which is what causes a lot of blood pressure issues as we get older, because now we're pumping blood through a restricted nozzle. The pressure goes up, whereas if the vessel would expand, it will absorb some of that pressure, and that's what happens when we're younger. So that is a direct measurable result that I saw within the first 60 to 90 days of being on the patch, is a reduction in that vascular age. And all the little things that we see in vascularity changes as we get older that doctors look for. For instance, your earlobe, you'll see people that start to get that fractured line, that dent, or a crease in their earlobe. It's because of lack of blood flow to that, and now you're starting to get that indentation. That's one of the things that cardiologists look for, because it's a sign that if you've got problems vascularly there, you're going to have them in your heart. You know, I've got brothers who are younger than me with big old creases in their ears. Mine are smooth as can be. I haven't seen any of that. That's all vascular age related and vascular damage related. So, you know, those are the kind of things that hopefully I'm not having the damage in my artery, so I'm not plaquing them up. I'm not, you know, calcifying that area and giving it, you know, what it needs to repair whatever was there before. And we saw a reduction in the amount of plaque, which, as small as it was still reduced. So some great things.
Some miracles happening with the X39. So Glenn, do you have more time? Because we have several questions, but I don't
I
want
have
to.
some time. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, before we take any more questions, I know this seems kind of out of order, but for those who need to get off, I just want to make a couple of announcements. Is that okay, Glenn?
Please.
Okay, so next week, we are having Coach Ivy back with Mamie Langley. Mamie is director of coaching at Codebreaker Technologies, which is a multi-million-dollar all around the world company. They actually specialize in helping business owners, corporations, networkers to grow their business and increase their revenue by like huge amounts. And, you know, of course, that depends on your willingness to learn the new skills, right? So anyway, next week, they'll be here coming to coach our team, which is truly a gift to be able to have the director of this company. And that I need everyone to block out 90 minutes, and it'll be really worth your time and effort. And you can invite, this isn't just about LifeWave. This is about, even if you have friends that are real estate agents or in other network marketing companies, please bring them to the call, because this is something that I feel like truly everyone can benefit from. And we're here to change lives, not just make money. So go ahead and do that. And also next week, we'll have a different Zoom call number because we're going to be using Ivy's. And anyway, so we'll get that out as soon as possible, probably like tomorrow. Okay, so thank you, Glenn. All right, so Tom has been very patient. So Tom, would you please ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Always learn something. And
Good.
I have kind of two questions. One would be, do you would you prefer to do your pitch again for a different group, or are you open to sharing your PowerPoint?
Both.
Both?
I have no
Excellent.
problem sharing the PowerPoint. I'll put it together. That's the one that I did. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I would be more than happy to share it. And, if time permits, depending on when they're looking for me to do a presentation, I'd be glad to do so.
Excellent. Thank you. I have some friends who are very technical, and the more detailed you
Mhm.
satisfy their questions, and they're scientists and engineers and medical
Yeah.
professionals, and I think your pitch would appeal to them very much.
Well, one of the
Uh,
other things we can do is Desiree records these, and
Yes.
the easy thing is to send them that so that they can see
Yep.
the presentation. And then we can get on a three-way call and I can answer their questions. So you don't have to wait for another presentation, although we do these the first Tuesday of the month. So
Right.
you know that that's there for you. Grab the recording, save it, and you can send it out all the time.
Yes. Thank you. That's and that, of course, I don't know if Desiree has a Dropbox. I do, and Malcolm does. So I think we'll be able to handle that pretty
Yeah,
easily.
get in touch with me. I'll be glad to share it.
Yeah. And my second question was related to how you described the use of glutathione in one of your previous questions, and how you were talking about how David had created some of the earlier patches before we got to the X39. And we've had in the past um, some questions about how the other patches work.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to come back and share us in another couple of months
Mhm.
how the other patches work, because I think the stem cells, people are starting to learn more and more. At least in our team, we're learning more and more about how the stem cells work, and we promote that as the first patch to wear.
Absolutely.
See how that works for you, Mr. Prospect, or how Mr. Interested User, your curiosity seeker. See how that works for you. You've got 90 days to check it out and do all that. But then they usually come back and go, it worked, but I'm curious about these other patches. And I'm wondering if you could come back and kind of give us some feedback on the meridian points, which patches really need to be at the meridian points, like you mentioned, the hand, and or right at the point of pain.
Right.
The energy patches, you usually see the sports figures wearing them right here at their front of their shoulders. So maybe if you can give us some insight into that, that would be tremendous as well.
Yeah, that's fine. And the reason we use the X39 as our go-to patch is because it overlays. Once you get that production, it kind of does what a lot of these other patches do. Not maybe to the level of it, but certainly gives you that overlayment. And then if you have specific issues that you can use the other patches, but you also get into a position that, somebody's spending $100 a month using the X39. The last thing we want them is to get off of that and go to another patch because they can't afford both. If you
Right.
can only afford one, definitely use the X39.
Yep.
And if you, in short durations of issues that you might have, you may include some of the other patches to give your body a boost in a very specific manner. But yes, I understand what you're saying.
Like your knee and the joint issues. Some people have very bad cartilage reduction, and if they can just get the inflammation down and the pain down, and that can happen, as you know, with X39.
Yeah.
And that 90 days helps with that. But sometimes having that extra set of patches every so often, and knowing how to really use them, and having us being able to relate that to them without saying, oh, just go look at the website and follow the directions.
Just tell them to do that. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. And
That'd be great.
set
Thanks,
that up
Glenn.
with Desiree, if you want me to come on at a different time. then
Yeah,
I'll-
we would have to do that we would have to do it on a different day
Okay.
than our regular Tuesday, unless we'll figure that out. Tom, we'll absolutely do something, because I think those are some great questions. So I have a question from Lynn, and Lynn has a question. Let's see. There we go. I'm sorry. Someone has radiating nerve pain from neck to fingers post-injury 8 months ago. Severe pain. What is your suggestion? Radiates from neck through arm to fingers.
Well, I mean, I have to start with the X39 so that we can start regenerating that nerve. Now, keep in mind, nerves are very slow growing. So, they're not going to put a patch on and get relief immediately. But the ultimate issue is to regenerate that nerve. And until that ultimately happens, you're not going to get that relief. Now, we have seen with people with strokes and everything else, get nerve regeneration and feeling back. And unfortunately, a lot of times when nerves start reconnecting, you actually feel more pain because you've got more nerves now that are feeling the result. No different than if your arm fell asleep while you were sleeping and it starts to wake up, you get all of those tingling pins and needles in it because the nerves are coming back in response. So, that may be a perfect reason to do a combination of patches like the X39 to start that healing and regeneration, and maybe the pain patch to block some of the pain in the interim.
Okay, excellent. Any other patches along with the X39 if they were in a financial position?
Well, I would say the pain patch,
Which would be Aon?
the Aon, and Aon works a little differently because it changes some of the chemical structures in our brain, similar to what opioids kind of do. So they help production of things that don't block the pain at its source, but it stops us from responding to the pain the same way. To put it lightly, it's you don't care about it as much. And that's what basically an opioid does. It just makes you not care about the pain as much, which gives you relief.
Yes.
And that's what the Aon patch will do. Whereas the pain patch actually uses two patches to set up an electrical current through the two patches that block the signal from the brain, or vice versa, the signal back to the brain that the injury is causing. And so you can, if you use them correctly, can block a lot of the pain directly to the brain, and that combination can work too.
Okay, excellent.
So
have
much
one more
stress comes with pain that the Aon relieves so much of that stress level in the brain that can really help people.
Thank you. Lynn says, thank you, Glenn. Really appreciates your input. Michael Dickey has a question.
Hi, Michael.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, my wife, the immediate concern is she just developed some sharp shooting pain below her left elbow. We've gone to the doctor today and 3 weeks ago, so that tells you the level of pain. But today it became unbearable. We have used the patches, which have been really, really helpful. But basically, we've gotten it's worked for a while, and then the pain came back, and so it's been a hit and a miss. So I didn't know if you had any kind of suggestions on what, and if you want more details, I will give them to you.
Well, I mean, that's obviously a nerve issue, and any joint like an elbow, when nerves come together to penetrate through the joint and then re-expand out the other side, if there's any kind of inflammation in the joint, the Bertha sacs and all kinds of things can swell, put pressure on those nerves, cause those kinds of responses.
Let me stop for 1 second. The pain is below her.
Problem in the elbow that's pressing on the nerve, and that's why you feel a down line. And again, not knowing exactly, I'm just saying those are some of the things that it can do. One of the reasons that we'll see a response by using the X39 and a reduction in pain and all of those things, and then it seems to not work as well down the road, is because our level of sensitivity, if we're feeling pain on a 10 level and the X39 brings it down to 7, that is a dramatic reduction, and it's extremely noticeable. But if it stays at 7 or even goes down to 6 over a long period of time, 6 becomes the new intolerant pain that we have. So it's not a great way to judge whether or not the patches are still doing their job in helping repair.
Hmm.
It's just that it's
Yeah.
no longer giving you that same response as far as pain. And that's where probably
Right.
the pain patches could make a difference because they can actually block some of that pain going up. But, certainly the doctor needs to see if indeed there's something going on in the elbow or the joint or the nerve.
And she's had X-rays.
When it comes back out, it goes down the outside of your calf into your foot, right?
Uh-huh.
I've had people who have pain in their calf on that outside line, tremendous pain
Uh-huh.
there, when ultimately the damage was done to the sciatic nerve way up in the hip in the buttocks area. But that's where it's manifesting itself. And what it does is that irritation and that inflammation causes the muscle to start cramping. And as the muscle begins to cramp and knot up, then that's what's causing a lot of the pain. If you get a massage and they'll feel that knot. If they work that knot out, you'll get some relief for a day or two before it starts knotting up again. So, pain in the muscles can come from all kinds of responses in nerves. And again, it's healing the nerve, and then massage of the area could certainly help with the muscle tension. But I would try to pain patch, try to block some of that signaling
Yeah,
back to the brain
we've
that it's
used
hurt.
it has helped. I mean, we've used the patches, and my wife was spared an eye surgery with like about 6 weeks ago,
Mhm.
just from using the patches. She was going to have surgery in like 4 days, and I said nope. We played the patches really intensely for a couple of weeks, and then I brought her back to the doctor before the other doctor was going to do surgery, and he said, I was surprised. He says, "Oh, you don't need surgery."
Yep. Yeah.
So,
So you have proof
yeah.
that it's working all over. It's just when you have a problem like that. I was born with birth defects in my feet and have had tremendous amount of surgeries, and the nerve damage in my feet, they're always in pain. And I've seen some response, but I don't notice it anymore. But I'll tell you what happened. I ran out of patches back in COVID days when it was the shipping was so late, and I was out of patches for
Oh,
5
gosh.
days. I noticed just how much it was actually helping through that 5 days when it came back really strong quickly. And so does it all go away? Probably never. But I do know that it is reduced from where it was. It's just now that is my pain every day. So, I feel it, and I would love for it to go away too, but it doesn't always. But stay working at it. I mean, you're getting repair.
Do you have anything for heart rhythm? Oops, for heart rhythm, I guess if we could say it like that.
Well, that now we're getting into a little bit more specifics, and go back to what we discussed in the presentation on water and charge on cells. And heart rhythms can be electrical issues. They can also be valve issues. So, that's something that a doctor
Yeah.
would have to diagnose. If we're not getting proper mitral valve closure, then you're getting backwash. That can, atrial fibrillation, all kinds of issues can come from it. But again, repair of those things can alleviate some of those problems, or at least stop them from getting worse. I have
Yeah.
I have a little dog who's 11 years old that was diagnosed with a heart murmur. His mitral valve, because he's a small dog, his mitral valve is small, and as he's gotten older, it's gotten thicker, and it's not responding, and it's not closing properly. So he's getting a lot of backwash, and in consequently, what's happened is his left upper ventricle has grown tremendously because it's overworking, and of course they expect him to go into heart failure, and they gave him not quite a year ago, but close to a year ago now, about 3 to 6 months to live with his condition. Now, I've been patching him with X39. He just had his annual visit last week. There has actually been a mild improvement in the heart functionality, and the upper ventricle has shrunk some, so it's not working as hard. and they've seen some
Wow.
improvement in the vessel, in the valve itself. So it is beginning to close slightly. So we are actually remodeling the collagen in the valve so that it's softening a little bit and it's actually beginning to work a little bit. So they're going, he
Oh.
should have been dead already, but he's doing quite well. He's actually better off now than he was when we diagnosed it last May. So if you can continue this, he should have a few more years in him. And by then he's pushing the level of, no matter what, he's just getting old enough that he wouldn't live any past that anyway. So yes, we've seen change, and it works just as well in animals as it does humans.
Yeah.
But the electrolyzed reduced water has a tremendous amount to do with helping
Mhm.
recharge cells all over our body, the heart included.
That's right.
As that response gets better and the electrical signals can work, then you get a better natural rhythm from the brain's ability to signal each of those cells to work like they need to do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, we like that water.
Good. Keep
It's
drinking it.
oh yeah, yeah.
Keep in mind,
it cuts back on the amount of nutrition you need actually because you have more
you're
absorption.
extracting so much nutrition out of your food. So yeah.
Yeah.
Glenn, what a
I enjoyed
fabulous,
very much your
fabulous
speech.
call.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad it helped. All
Thank
right.
you, Mike. That was a great question. And
Yeah.
I really want to, for everyone to actually unmute themselves, let's give Glenn a hand because he was
Guys,
so
I'm glad to
incredible.
be here to help everybody.
It was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very much.
So
It's great to
I'm-
hear from you and talk
Thank
to
you
you.
so much,
Well,
Glenn.
it's really nice for me to see y'all's faces and meet you all and be able to follow up down the road. We've had people who we've talked to a year ago that have called me, and I, that's the rewarding thing, is to see so many people get such great results. It's why you have to spend the time sharing it. It would be selfish not to.
well, we appreciate this information because it's just phenomenal the way you explain it. And I just want everyone to know that Glenn, for every first Tuesday of the month, Glenn will be doing our stem cell presentation, and you
Yay.
can bring, your new prospects on so that they can come and learn from him as well. So everyone, please unmute again and let's say thank you and good night. I love all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
We love you too.
Thank you.
Y'all have greatness
Appreciate you so
within
much,
you.
Glenn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wealth of
See y'all
knowledge.
next week.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
sharing your
much.
life with us.
Cheers.
Matt.
Blessings.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.